people have ever gone before. And it's a subject that becomes very, very touchy. Who are you? I mean, who am I? And we look at each other and try to determine, what is your purpose for existing? Why are you here? What do you have to do here? Or do you have anything to do here? Or is this just an accident or a mistake? Is there any logical reason for us being alive, existing? Or do we just get born and then go through all of this insane things that we are involved in every day and then die? Is there a logical point? See? But we discussed a lot of things last week, and what I figured was it's now important that we kind of proceed step by step and slow it down so that maybe we can come up with a general understanding of what was said. And not necessarily, and remember, I'm not here telling you to believe anything. I'm not asking you to believe a thing. That's not required. And as to how I may know these things that we're talking about, then I would just ask you to hold that, and then one day down the road we'll talk about that. But most of you who were here last week have a pretty good concept of what I was into. Those of you who weren't, it's on tape 335, but pretty much I think today will go over a lot of it. Or preferably stay with us as we explore this thing, which is basically a riddle, and that is the very riddle or the very question of the existence of life and consciousness. Just to be able to think. Everything that goes on in your existence, goes on in here. You're, encapsulated inside of what they call a head, and that keeps you, separated from everything that is the all, but the entire existence that you enjoy is in consciousness, So the first thing that we discussed last week when we started talking about, what is our logical reason to exist and where are we going and what are we doing? We talked about the word salvation. That's a very religious word and a word that is extremely important to the people in churches today. In fact, the whole basis of religion is built around being saved. And I made the statement that it was absolutely impossible to be saved. You can't be saved. There's no way that you can be saved. And that would bring me, into a head-on collision with Christianity and so forth and a lot of religious concepts. People get very mad because they get mad at me anyhow. But, you really get mad when you step on things like this. I can tell them, communion started as cannibalism, and they just say, well, he's a complete whack nut. But when you start saying you can't be saved, then it challenges their philosophies. My concern about the concept of salvation is that it includes us as the earth creatures as we are, with all of our desires, with all of our hopes, with all of our fears. And basically being individuals, what salvation always meant to me was that even though physically you die, right away you pop up just like you are, with your blue shirt on and your sneakers or your Nikes or whatever, and there you are again, and your mother's there, your father's there, or whomever, and you're the same person, and you meet the people that died before, and you're walking down the street and you live on a split level, and everything is the same. That's what I thought was salvation. In other words, I always considered salvation that you were just like you are now. One of the things I always had difficulty with is how old are you going to be? If you die when you're 85 and your mother died when she was 52, you're going to be up there and you're going to be older than your mother. And I always said, gee, that isn't good. And she's a kid, she might be a teenager. I couldn't. So, to me, all I'm trying to do here is to find something that's logical. Try to come up with some logical conclusion as to what in the world are we talking about, We transfer ourselves from here to a place called heaven, which is supposed to be on some planet. But of course it's not. You know, you say, well, you don't know that. Well, all we can deal with is what we know, and, you know, scientifically based and so forth and so on. But I do know that the entire concept of life is built around logic. Everything happens is logical. There's a logical explanation that winds up being available to everything that has ever occurred. People say, well, this was a miracle. No, it wasn't. It was just something that never happened before. And once it happens, then you can explain how it happened. There's nothing in the world. I mean, if somebody got healed, it was because some glandular activity went into activity inside of their body for whatever reason. There's always a logical explanation. And in the same reason, if you're alive, what you're doing now, where you came from, and where you're going has to have a logical explanation attached to it, see? So in other words, the concept is transferring ourselves from a place here on this earth to some planet. But that concept itself is not justified by most religion, and it's not justified at all by the Bible. But unfortunately, religion, you know, has continued to push this philosophy that we're all going to die and we're all going to go to heaven and we're going to be the way we are, and, you know, we're going to see grandma and grandpa and your mother and father and all of these types of people. And this kind of gives us strength. I mean, you hear it all the time. You go to a funeral parlor and the first thing somebody says, I know so-and-so is up there looking down on us. Where? You know, looking down from where? I mean, the ceiling is shut. Where are they? What is going on here? I know so-and-so's, and I remember when my father died. My father was one of the first interior decorators for Macy's department stores in New York. He designed the very first float for the Thanksgiving Day parade. And I remember when he died, now he committed suicide because he was an alcoholic and he had a lot of trouble. He killed himself. And I remember going to the funeral parlor as a little kid and people said God needed an interior decorator in heaven. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't want to be an interior decorator. I'm not going to be one of those. The heck with that. And I mean, if you're going to want an interior decorator, you're going to make the guy kill himself so he can be an interior decorator. So, I mean, you know, what is he going to interior decorate and where on some planet? But this is what we do. But when you really get down to what the book says, it doesn't say what the religious people say. In fact, you want to see an eye-opener, take a look at page 437 of those little Bibles that you have. And you go to the book of Job, and Job chapter 7, verse 9. And what does it say? It says, page 437, it says, as the cloud is consumed and vanishes away, so he that goes down to the grave shall come up no more. It's logical. I mean, I have never, unless you know of somebody that has overcome that, everybody that's ever died and been buried has stayed there. Thank God. Thank God. I mean, I don't think it would be nice to have these people up walking around town. Can you imagine? No, you wouldn't want that in your neighborhood. Maybe on Halloween or something like that, it could be a kick. But other than that, stay where you are. I don't want to see that. So in other words, what is being said here is that your body is like a cloud. You see it, and then it's gone. I was talking to my brother this morning. I was talking about relatives. You know, I said, they all died. Nobody's around. Everybody's gone. You think of this. There are billions and billions of dogs on the planet. And 20 years ago, not one of them were alive. But there were still billions and billions of dogs. Now, do we have to make up a new doggy for everybody? I mean, do all the dogs have to be new dogs, or are they just recycled dogs? You know. And then you start to thinking, how does nature work this thing? And how do you work this? You know, how does this come together? And in Psalm 6:5 it says, for in death there is no remembrance of you, talking about God. In the grave, who shall give you thanks? In other words, if one goes to the grave and comes up no more, and if the person who dies cannot have any knowledge of God, how is it possible for someone to be saved? And what are we going to save? Most of the time, people who are on this earth are trying to get out of here because, you know, you're frustrated, you got your family problems, and now you're living in your life and you want to save this mess and start it all over again. So, you know, you say, well, God, you know, there's got to be something wrong. And if I tell people there is no such thing as salvation, then they'll say, well, you're reading the Old Testament. That's not what it says in the New Testament, you know. But there's something that it says in the New Testament that's very interesting. And remember, all I'm asking you to do is be logical. And I know if you've gone to church all your life, that was exactly what you were told not to be, logical. I'm just saying, be logical. You're mature people. Some of you have graduated from college. You're intelligent people. You're logical people. You understand things. You know there's science and scientific realities in life. You live in a universe that is measured by law. Everything interacts with everything else in a predetermined way. I mean, everything is right there. Everything is extremely logical. And yet, when we come to the question of who we are, what happens to us, and where do we go, we suddenly become extremely illogical. We give up all of our logic and all of our understanding, and we become nuts, you see. And we really do. We believe there was a snake that talked to a lady, and a fish swallowed this guy and threw up, and an evangelist came out and all this stuff, and we don't bat an eye. We go to church, we say, hallelujah, this is great, but you know that can't happen. But we simply decide to believe that or accept that because we can't come up with any other explanations for it. But you can. Once you start understanding logic, if you'll take all of this stuff you've always called spirit and go into the realm of quantum physics, you can understand it. Or you can pick up the Bible. Pick up a Bible, you're reading it. How many people realize you're reading mythology? The whole thing is a myth. Some say, well, you're saying it didn't happen. No, on the contrary, mythology doesn't mean it's something that didn't happen. Mythology means something that does happen, but it's hidden behind symbolic words. And the very book that you pick up says, don't take it literally. Don't be a minister of the letter. Understand the dark sayings of the ancients and so forth. Understand that. Understand the sayings of the Pythagoras and Democritus and the Platos and the ancient Greeks who wrote this thing. This whole book was written in Greek. Initially, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew, but about 300 BC, the whole thing was translated into Greek. The whole New Testament was written in Greek, every bit of it. And written by the Hellenistic Greeks, which means you can't pick up a page of this without thinking, is this mythology? Because it is. And then when you start to break the code of it, you start to understand it's talking about you. And it's talking about your relationship with the universe and the cosmos. And it's talking, I mean, you're reading and you're seeing things that were authored by people of the likes of the Platos and Aristotles and the Pythagoras and people. Zeno, who spoke of quantum physics 3,000 years ago. And so my first question, who in the world taught him? Who taught Democritus about electrons and the atoms and so forth thousands of years ago? When everybody else was splitting rocks and selling sheep in the marketplace, this guy was talking about the interaction of electrons with atoms. How is this possible? Well, we've talked about that. But anyhow, in the Bible, in the New Testament, you talk about, well, you're going to go to heaven, and you're going to be like you are, and you're going to meet Grandma and Grandpa and all these people, and we're all going to get together, we're going to have a barbecue, we're going to go over to somebody's house and eat ziti, because that's what they do down here. That was one of the great thrills I always had when anybody died. You know, you're a kid, you don't care. Well, I knew one thing. Wow, he died. You know, I don't know whether it was bad or good, but I knew one thing. We were going to go back to his house and have ziti. That was a given. Ziti and cake, you know. I sat through the service, and oh, man, then everybody got in the car. You know, you all went in a line in the car. You went back to Uncle Jim's house and went in there, man, get out the cake. And then by the time it was over, half of them, at least in my family, were smashed again. I'll never forget. This is a true story. And the grandmother died, and they used to put him in the box in the house, in the parlor. I mean, it was, I couldn't have, you know, I just told my mother, I want out of here. I don't want to hang around here, you know, because not too many people left, and it was only me and the lady in the box. I don't want to stay here. Because then I could never figure, how are you going to go to sleep upstairs? But anyhow, Uncle Jim, this guy was a perennial drunk. I mean, the guy was drunk every day. I mean, he was drunk every day. But anyhow, they were laying out the lady in the box, the grandmother. She was grandma. I can't remember her, but I remember this till I die. When she was like, every time the guy would open the door to let another person come in to view the body, this cat would come in. And the cat would run and go right underneath the box, the casket. And Uncle Jim would say, it's her, she's back. You know, I can't get her out of it. And they'd throw the cat out, and they'd open the door again. The cat would come back in and run right back under the box. And Uncle Jim, he was out, and I, honest to God, saw him. He's back out in the kitchen, and he's going behind the stuff, and he's got the bottle out. Well, you know, these are crazy people. And so, I mean, he was convinced that she had come back as the cat, and there was nothing he could do about it. But, you know, and I didn't know. But, you know, it's funny how things stick with you in your mind. But I'll never forget that incident. But what it says in the New Testament, on page 799 of the Bible, they were asking Jesus about this same thing, about, you know, people going to heaven and, you know, what's going on. And it's a very interesting statement, he says, in Matthew 22, verse 30, 31, and 32. Two things he says that are very interesting. One, he says, in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. So the first thing that I see here that I wanted to discuss with you today was talking about who you are. And now he said, or Jesus or whatever, said, you're like angels in heaven. Well, what have we found, and as you look in the material that I've given you, we have found that an angel is in actuality an angle of light, which is a photon, which science calls a messenger particle. So this is interesting. If the Bible is saying that when people leave here, they become like angels, then is he saying that we become angles of light, light particles? Starting to get a little bit logical, because this is exactly what's inside of you that makes you move. You have energy. You are connected in some way to an energy system that causes your heart to beat for maybe 70, 80, 90 years. It never stops. What keeps it going? There's an electric charge somewhere. Where's it coming from? It's coming from magnetism. It's coming from electrical energy that passes through your body every day. You're connected to the universe in that way by angles of light. And these angles of light are photons, which science calls messenger particles. And the Bible says that after you leave this body, you become as an angel or as light particle. Light, your body filled with light, okay. But he says then in 31, as in touching the resurrection of the dead, have you not read which was spoken, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God is not a God of the dead, but of the living. Now see, that's interesting, because my feeling, and we'll share this with one another, is that once a person on the earth dies, that's it. And I'll show you why, because who are you? I mean, who are you really? You know, we've talked about this before. I mean, there were many people, you know, they're thanking God and say, gee, God, thank you for giving us life. God didn't give you life. Your mother and father gave you life. God had nothing to do with it. It was their idea. I don't want to get graphic about this, but basically, well, I guess you do have to get a little bit graphic. I mean, your mother was a female, your father was a male, and when males and females come together in the intercourse like that, there's sperm that leaves the male, goes into the female, and out of the billions of them, one finds its way to an egg, and bingo, there you are. But what if they decided, John, I don't think this is going to work? What do you mean, Ethel? I don't think this is going to work. I don't want to go through this. Here's your ring. Now, that's the end of that. That's the end of you. There is no two people on the face of the earth who could ever come together and put together the exact chromosomes and genetics that result in you. If they didn't come together, you would have never been here. So who created you? Your mother or your father. No God had anything to do with it. There are people who exist today because a woman was raped. Oh, thank God, thank God. There are people who exist because somebody didn't use protective gear or whatever. Because they call them up, and you hear the woman gets on the phone, and the woman calls up the man and says, guess what? What? You won't believe this. What? I'm pregnant. Ah, you know, I should have stopped at this Rite Aid. I don't know what. I forgot. You know, so it's a mistake, and you're here. That's not even what are you going to do. Who are you going to blame? Or who are you going to credit and say, thank you, God? Why? Because he forgot to go to the drugstore. You're going to thank God.
And this is the way life is. But we create out of it all of these stories to make it somehow feel reasonable that, we're involved, that God did this, God gave you life, and all of these types of things. And you find out basically that it is all kind of, it's almost like spinning the wheel. We just do to one another, we create life. And then after you're created, after this action has taken place and something starts to form within the womb of the woman, then all of the chromosomes start piling in. 23 come in from your father, 23 come in from your mother, and they deposit themselves in you. And what is it? That's downstream from hundreds of thousands of years of every nut that ever was in your family tree is all flowing downstream and dumping into you, and there it is. And you wonder why you feel the way you do. I don't know why I feel the way, because Uncle Clyde in 18 was a nut. And part of it is in you. And so you got all of this stuff. The way you look is because of your family. It has nothing to do with God. And the way you act is because of these genetic, your tendency to a particular disease. There are people who are going to get some kind of disease. It's because of everything that flowed downstream and emptied into them from genetics and chromosomes. So who created that? There are some children, babies that are born and terribly deformed and things. I mean, who's responsible? Is this God? But we can't. We just never can bring ourselves to become logical about this. What is this? What's going on here? Is this really this religious, spiritual stuff, or is there something, logical here? Something. What the heck is this all about? How does this work? So forget spirit. There's no such thing as spirit. Spirit is just a word that was made up by the people in the Middle Ages to describe something that they didn't understand, that's all. This is what it is. It's photon, it's electron, it's atom, it's the invisible subatomic particles inside of you that cause you to have life, that cause you to think. But no matter, Mark and I were talking last week, and I was listening. I always ponder what he says, because he says a lot of neat things all the time. And he says, there's so much chaos in the subatomic world, in the invisible world. And things rage with one another, and a war with one another, and colliding with one another. He says, how could it, you can't even conceive how there could be any kind of life come out of this. And yet, at the basis or the foundation of all of the chaos, of all of the invisible, chaos that goes on inside of everything, one thing sustains itself, and that's consciousness. Consciousness. That one thing that lets you know that you exist. Consciousness. And so that's where we come from. And so God, or Jesus in the Bible says, God is not a God of the dead. Dead people are just dead bodies. They're not even people. It's the conveyance you're using so that you can communicate with me and I can communicate with you. It's the only reason you need it. And then you have it also so that your senses can be titillated by the things that, you can have access to. Whether it be chocolate ice cream or rancholadas or Jimmy Buffett or whatever it may be. Or, there's a need for light to experience existence. But in order for light to experience existence, it has to be inside of a body. It has to. And so then we say, well, if it's not a God of the dead, but a God of the living, what part of us is living? So, in other words, there is also a need for you to die symbolically when you are healthy and very much alive, to then find this angle of light that bodies do find. Dead bodies, when they die, find this angle of light and then return to that neutral state of light, abandoning this body which is going to be buried. It's just like a used car. Just take it. I know, but I just have to tell you, cemeteries are junkyards. But you can't use that word. It's offensive. But it's a junkyard. What is it? I kneel at the junkyard, I bring flowers to all these things at the junkyard. But it is something that the person that was there is not there anymore. I always get the kick out of whenever you go to funerals or something, and you see people stand, maybe there's a policeman at the gate, bringing the traffic in. That policeman is probably under the ground here somewhere. Has already come and has already taken part into another body. There is no there is no logical way that we together can explain unless we just are willing to say, let me ascend to a point of maturity and look at what life really is, about what in the world is going on. So then if we die symbolically, or if we come into the point where we expose ourselves to this light, this magnetism, in a way that is prescribed by ancient talk, then do we get to that point where we can ascend and begin to understand? There's a Zen saying that I shared with you. It said, if you die before you die, then when you die, you will not die. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a young lady here, and the young lady said, come up to me and said, gee, everything you said I really like, but at this point where you said there's no God, that frightens me, and I can understand it. We were at that time talking about Ahmad Halusi, who was teaching Islam, and Ahmad Halusi said, there is no God, there is just Allah, and Allah is not a God, saying there was just everything was God. But think of this, and how beautiful it would really be once we understand this. Because our concept of God is this thing of power off somewhere that we pray to and kneel to and appeal to and beg not to let us happen to us what happens to the guy across the street. Now, all these things. But what he's saying, what he was talking, no, there's not any God like that. What there is what this Allah, there is all. You are part of it. You embrace it. It embraces you. It never leaves you. It's in every being, every atom of your body is this entity which you call God. But it's the concept of God that we had that, it's something, it's like Bette Midler sings the song, God is watching us from a distance. Well, what Lucy is saying, if he's watching you from a distance, then it can't be God because he's separated from you. What you call, what you understand as God, is the very flowing of your being, the very structure inside of you that beats and moves and is life. That is God. So you don't have to pray or go to anywhere, but just learn how to come into a harmony with the very thing. Everything that you need. You don't need anybody to fill you with their spirit. Everything that you need is already inside of you. What you need to do is learn simply how to come in contact with what you already have. So it was like the little rose, and the beautiful rose on the bush just dreaming someday it could become a rose because it doesn't realize what it is. It doesn't realize what it has. So then, to basically understand, there is no salvation for the human being to be reunited with loved ones. All the loved ones who have died are either in graves or in sharks or wherever the heck they are, but they are, that's the end of it. It's over. Because all that is in heaven are angles of light. And let's explain this to you. But that what I'm doing is I'm breaking down every traditional concept that we dreamed that was important. And it smacks against our emotional need to embrace and love and all of these types of things. But remember something, that which is nature is not emotional. So there's no emotion in that. There's emotion in consciousness, but there's no emotion in nature. I'll never forget the time when we lost one of our Dalmatians. It was a daughter of the other dog that we had. Her name was Flower, and she died, and I promised Flower I would take her out on the back porch before I had to take her down and have her put to sleep. She was, really gone. And her mother was in the house, and her mother came out, Gigi, and I remember, you were there. You never forget this. And there was Flower lying on, just looking at her backyard, lying on the porch there, and Gigi came out and looked at her and just raised the front paw and then turned and walked away. There's no emotion involved in it. She understood more than we understood how this works and what this is all about. Somehow knowing that this dog who was about to die was a body, but that light was going to leave that dog and find its way to another. Yes? Yeah, well, we were in bed with the dog when she was dying, and we actually, both of us sensed, and it's an amazing thing, we sensed the life energy, the light leave her body. So it's an amazing thing. So basically what we understand is this, and then we look in the Bible and say, well, where is heaven? Okay, we don't want to die and go to heaven. But we refuse to accept the principle of where this is. And in the Bible on page 853, in Luke chapter 17, verse 20, when it tells you where heaven is, the kingdom of God, It says people are looking up and they're looking down, they're looking left and looking right, but the kingdom of God is within you. So it's consciousness. It's a matter of consciousness. There is no clearer statement in any scripture but that the kingdom of God, that which we call the kingdom of God, which is heaven, is within you. It's consciousness. And if we tap it and we begin to understand it as mature adult people, and we are really ready to abandon traditional religion and superstition, come to grips with quantum physics and the understanding of the human body and the anatomy and the cultures that are interacting with the cosmos, we can understand it and we can become part of it. Then you can become part of God. God becomes part of you, and you finally live as nature intended you to live. See, there was a fellow that I studied. His work's name is René Descartes. I don't know how many of you heard of him, but it goes back a few years back into the Middle Ages. And he says, I exist not because of my body, but because of consciousness. René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. The mere fact, the only thing that I can identify myself with is the fact that I think, therefore I am. Not because I look the way I do. I look the way I do because of my parents. I act the way I do because of my training. I had the chromosomes come into me as a fetus, and then when I was born, after I have all of the chromosomes in genetics, so I'm going to look like them and talk like them, then they start making it so that I act like them. The only thing that I did which was good, that I stopped acting like them, when I married Joan, she made me stop drinking. It's true, because she said to me, and she sat down with me one night, and she says, you know, you come from a long line of people who are alcoholic. And she says, you have to stop. And I'll tell you what caused it. We had a party one night, and we had reel-to-reel tape, you know, and the tape got off the reels, and I was in a totally inebriated state trying to roll the tape back on the reel so it would play again, and then totally frustrated, I walked into the hallway there where we had all these bookshelves, and I walked into it, and every book from Tolstoy to George Washington fell on my head. Just books crashed down. And that's what she talked to me, and I've never had a drink of alcohol since. It's been 30 years. Because I realized, you know, God, what she's saying to me is right. I spent my whole life stepping over bodies, especially around the holidays. They were all drunk laying on the floor. We're going over Uncle Jim's and Aunt Annie's for Christmas. Everybody's on the floor stoned, you know. Stuff. Hi, Uncle Jim, you know, Merry Christmas. Well, it's funny, but it really is pathetic. It really is pathetic. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. But I never could understand Uncle Jim, though. He was something. As smashed as he would get before he'd pass out on the floor, he took his teeth out and put them right over here. Because you didn't want to swallow them. So you had to step over the teeth and over Uncle Jim and all. Merry Christmas. That was great. Oh, God. So then when we look for survival, we look for consciousness. And this consciousness is individual. And what we want to think about here now, just bear with me for a minute, is the thoughts, the consciousness that goes on inside of your head, which are totally unique. Can you imagine? Let me just show you how unique your consciousness is. How about if we took the thoughts that go on inside of you and put them up on a screen here? Well, you'd all leave. You would all leave because you couldn't deal with that. I don't want anybody knowing this. I mean, what about the things that you were thinking last night, or the things that, you know, you get by yourself and think? You want that on here? Okay, here's Mary Jungard. Mary, you're next. And she's gone. She's up and driving down. You couldn't stand anything like that, because these are all these unique, wild things that go on inside of everybody's mind. So it gives us a point of view to say, where did that stuff come from? Is it the individual? Is it your consciousness? Is it somebody else's consciousness? What I mean by that is, if the light that is the energy force within your body leaves when your body dies, do you leave with it? Oh, wait a minute. We got your body here. Now you're going to die, and the light is going to go. But what happens to you? We know light is going to leave. There's no doubt about that. And how do we know that? We know that for a fact. It's not even a question. We can prove it. If you look on the material that I gave you and the stuff that I gave you on page 82, there's a teleportation of a photon. It was carried out in Austria, where the properties of a photon were here, say inside of your head. The properties were destroyed, and the photon came back to life and is over here 3 feet away. Well, how's that possible? Now, when they first did it, it was just a measurement. But then they did it in California. They repeated it, and they just did it in December, and they proved that the same photon that went in here came out here. I mean, it's like exactly the same as Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty. Gets into there, bingo, he's gone. He shows up over here. So we know, without a shadow of a doubt, based on Austria and California, on their experiments of teleportation, that when this light, the properties of this light are destroyed in one place, it comes to life in another place. You can't kill it. So then if the properties of light, the photon, are inside of your head when you die, then you would say reasonably, logically, given the experiments that took place, that light reappears at another place. So then in your body goes down, but the properties of inner light go on. Something leaves your body. And what we're saying leaves your body is light, which is an angle of light, or what you called in religious terms an angel of light, a messenger. It has entered into your body as a fetus, and at the time that the body can no longer support life, it leaves. But the point is, do you go with it? Which part of you goes? Of course we want to get out of here, and this is over. I want out, I'm out of here. So I want to go with the light. But do you go with that light, or do you wind up in the box? So the question is, does that light take any part of you with it? And basically, the answer would be no. It takes some accumulated or evolved experiences that you've had that will play out in its next encounter, but you are a creation of your parents. You're not a creation of God, or are you? Now watch this. Just stay with me for a minute. See, what we want to know here is that this light that's leaving is taking us. Even though we realize that the body is staying here, that's just the car, that's the vehicle, but we want to know that the light in some way is taking us. But we can't create a story in order to appease our desire. Let's look at it logically. Let's go back to the beginning, okay? We understand about the coming together of the mother and father and so forth and so on. The body begins to be formed and picks up chromosomes, and then when the time is right, the pineal is formed. The body being created inside of your mother is penetrated by light which descends from above on an angle. And this light is coming down at all the time. Now, we're going to get into, through your mother's pineal, one light particle finds another pineal and it enters and nests. That's you. It's exactly the same basic principle as millions of sperm swimming up this canal and then touching the egg. Here you got billions of light particles flowing in a wave down, and one of them finds its way in and animates your body, gives you life, allows consciousness, and allows all of these things to happen. You have to be hooked up to some kind of an electrical source. You have to be. You can't just be a brain, and you have to be animated, and you have to have some connection with nature. So the light particle that found the baby's pineal is not unlike the sperm that found the egg. The question is, are you the light that came into the baby's body? Or are you the body that the light came into? Are you the light that came into the baby's body? Or are you the body that the light came into? Or are you both? I mean, had you missed by a few degrees as an angle of light, you could have wound up being a bear. Why not? Because it's neutral light. It's not an intelligent light, it's a neutral light. But you're not a bear. See? So now you have found a nesting place. Now the question is this, and listen to this carefully. Before you found this nesting place inside of your mother's womb, did you have consciousness? Did you have consciousness as light before you found your way into your mother's room. To a limited degree, you did. Light that travels in wave, it can collapse, and it does have a degree of consciousness, but not on the level that we consider rational consciousness. Two thoughts, then. Let's consider two thoughts. One. Now, here's where we're going to get into some stuff that I might, you may question me, which is fine. But I'll just tell you I know this, and let it go. Let it go with that. If you were teleported here we get into a little Star Trek stuff. If you were teleported here for a particular mission, you will have consciousness, and you will return to an original body elsewhere, which is a body being preserved for you until your work here is done. You say, you got people freezing bodies right here. Don't worry about that. Okay. Number two, if this is your first light experience as finding a living body is concerned, you are the primitive light consciousness. Primitive light consciousness will then have to enter in and start to evolve, start to pick up entities, pick up attachments of experiences and so forth and so on. Come on, if you could think of another way, if you want to dwell in the idea of, hocus pocus, that's one thing, but if you want to try to logically explain what this is all about. So now the body begins to develop, and it is totally out of your control. The chromosomes and the genetics do their things. You have nothing. You're the light. What we're saying is, you're the light. Here's the baby. You're the light. You enter in, you're inside of the baby, but now the baby is developing. The baby is developing genetically, the baby is developing through the chromosomes, the baby is developing through all of these things, and you have nothing to do with it. The baby comes out of your mother's body, it is you. Your skin color, the color of your hair, all programmed into you by years and years of intercoursing between people who come on before you, and so everything then is in a pattern. Here you are, but inside of you, that light that entered to animate it has nothing whatsoever to do with it. Nothing whatsoever to do with this. And what I am proposing to you is that you enter the body, you become part of your family of the earth. But that which entered the body was of a different family altogether. See, it's like people say, if you have sought, and I will prove to you biblically that you seek another body, light seeks another body after it cannot. But if you have, people say, the one thing I want to do, Mom died. When I die, I want to go on. I just want to see my mother again. But if you've lived, say, 1,000 incarnations, which mom do you want to see? You've had thousands of mothers. Which one are you in love with? The only mother that you really want to see again is the one you remember. Every time you enter into another body to continue the evolution of consciousness, to restore this earth back to the way it was intended. You enter into the womb of another mother. It's another mother you have, another father you have, more brothers and sisters you have, thousands of them, and you don't know any of them except the one you can remember. And so that one you want to see. You have to be lined up. Where did you get down to 975? This is Mother Michelle. Oh, yeah. Oh, well, it's nice to meet you. But at one time, she held you. At one time, she nurtured you. At one time, she cuddled you. That is the essence of true life. But we can't, we're not given to think of those things, of what the reality of life is.
Bill, are you saying the light enters when you're in utero?
When I'm in what?
When you're in...
Hello. What is this one? I'm in utero. Get up here. That sounds like, it's not anything like...
medical term. In uterus, in utero. It's another name for it when the fetus is still inside the mother.
Well,
that's when the light enters then?
To me, the assumption would be that the light would enter into the fetus when the pineal gland is active in the fetus body. When there's a pineal gland.
And what stage of development does the pineal
I
gland?
haven't a clue. It's probably post-uteral, whatever happened. Utero, I like that. Utero, that sounds like something from a... Okay.
Great.
But so there are two forms of consciousness here that we have to talk about. The light that comes into the body, the union of the light and the body, and if you take the union of the light that came into the body, and here you are.
And we go around, we shake hands with each other, we have Christmas parties, don't we? We go to restaurants, we go to Atlantic City, and it's a combination of the body and the light that came into the body, and we have an action here because your heart is going to keep beating. All of these things are going to keep going on because of the fact that you have this energy, this electricity. Now, the part of you that is consciousness is something is happening here because there is something very unique in the middle of all of this, which is consciousness, the way you think. Some of it programmed by your family and training and a church, but there's something inside of you that is not. There is something inside. I mean, there is a part of you which says, I'm an Italian, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Jewish, I'm whatever it is because of your parents. There's a part of you that has dark hair or blonde hair because of your parents. I like this, I do this. But there's another part of you that somehow is being drawn away from all of these things that have been given to you by your parents and by your system and by your society. There are two forms of consciousness here. But there is a part that is desperately pulling within you to get away from this, and that's why you're sitting here looking at me. So there's something else that came down that was put in the middle of this baby, and then the baby started forming genetically with the chromosomes and all of this and became an entity of life that was totally controlled by the people of the earth. But inside of that baby was this light particle that at a point is pulling you someplace else. Most of the time you pull back and say, no, I don't want to go that way because of the church. I don't want to be seen that way. I don't want to go that way because of my parents. I don't want to offend anybody. They'll get mad at me if I go to this meeting or if I do this. But there's something pulling inside of you. And so you'll sit and you'll listen to all of this stuff in churches, and yet inside of you there's something that pulls you and say, this bull. It's not true. It's not reasonable. Why am I here? You know? And so then that part is you've got to wheel and deal daily with the system that you live in. That's one part. But why is it doing what it is doing within you? What are you looking for that so many others out there are refuting? There's something that you're paying attention to. That's the light. There is a structure to this light. There is a consciousness to this light. It belongs to another family. It has nothing to do with the family that you wound up inside here, because a couple of degrees and you could have been in an African, a couple of degrees you're in France. I mean, you could be anybody. You had the potential to become anybody. Who knows? Who knows where you're going? But then you wind up inside of a human being and you start to pick up characteristics of a human being, and like starts to look like, but that's for another time. But there's what I want to dwell with now is, what is this? The idea would be that there is something inside of you that has a different origin than the rest of you. The rest of you has an origin from your mother and your father and your families that went on and on. But there is something inside of you that has a different origin that came from someplace else. And it is right now desperately inside of each of you calling you back to it. Right now pulling you back to the center. And it depended on this age of Aquarius to do it. It couldn't do it until this age of Aquarius. And that's even contained in the Kabbalah of the Jewish mystics. Dependent on, it's pulling you back and saying, come on. Come on, I want to show you who you are. Come on, I want to show you why you're inside of that body. You said, what am I inside of this crazy family? I used to say as a little kid, I said, what the heck am I? These people are nuts. I mean, I used to have more battles. It was like the OK Corral at our house. The people with knives were flying. People, do you ever see the movies where people crash through banisters? They would do that at my house. The man was over fixing the banister. I said, oh, we got to fix the banister again. So what am I doing? I didn't use some people say, you choose your parents. I chose this. This was my idea? No, I don't think so. No, God. But wait a minute. Could it be that somebody else chose it for me? Could it be that I had a mission? Could it be that there is an intelligence controlling this energy? And I don't know how many of you have heard of what is called the Great White Lodge. Well, we'll talk about that. But there is a command center
Oh, I know this is really wild, but there is a command center that moves these things around just like NASA down in Florida moves things around up in the sky and makes things happen. There's a command center, and much of this is programmed. We'll get to that. But anyhow, if the rest of you has an origin totally of the earth, there is something inside of you that has a different origin. Whoa! Every bit of you is of the earth, but one thing is inside of you came from outside. This magnetism, this light, this angle of light, this angel of light that you are. Thus, if one would use logic, if you use logic and think that consciousness is tremendously important in carrying out our activities on the earth, how curious is it that there is another aspect of consciousness which is pulling us to another place, pulling us to a higher realm, pulling us to a new idea, pulling us to a new enlightenment. There is something inside of us that is consciousness that says, I got to go to work, man. Oh, I got to get the car fixed. Oh, I got to get the insurance paid. Did you pay the mortgage? What did the doctor say? There's something in that. But there's another consciousness inside of us that's set apart from that consciousness that is saying, come into the center. Come into the light. I got something. Now is the time. There is something else pulling us. And that is the light that came down, that entered into you from above. And the people that are under the thumb of religion, they refute it, but they still sit there and they feel the same way you do, but they're not allowed to say anything, and they don't dare say anything because they'll get in trouble either with the religious or they'll get in trouble with their families or whatever. I mean, John had an uncle that signed us out of his will because of the way we were. I mean, that's tough. I was going to down and say, I'm repenting, I'm a believer. You know. Yeah, he was an Uncle Jim too, and I mean, that was the end of that, so we couldn't, so I couldn't do that. But if these people under the thumb of religion, they refute and any attempt to bring them towards this other light, they acknowledge something is there. They call it spirit, but they want no part of encountering it. What is it? What is it? It is the part of you that came as an angle of light when your body was being formed. It nested in your body. It is the force that pulls you to a higher room. It is the reason that you're sitting in this strange place looking at me. Could you ever remember, could you think 2 or 3 years ago you'd be sitting listening to this kind of stuff? No. So there is a consciousness attached to the magnetism that entered your body when it was a fetus, and this consciousness is separate and distinct from the consciousness which is evidenced in your daily activities. That consciousness is fed by genetics and training and earthly things. Remember, before you were born, you were capable of becoming anyone. It totally depends on the environment as to what you have become. You're rich, you're poor, you're stressed, you're relaxed, you go to Harvard or you go to Wharton or whatever these places are. I mean, it all totally depends on others. Everything depended on somebody else. There were caretakers of you. And where you went and what you did was totally dependent on them. But now, all you really want and all you want to be guaranteed is that you will always have this feeling of being someone. That feeling will always be with you. And we know now without any doubt that light goes forth to seek another body. And talking about light that was disturbed in Jesus in the Bible on page 788, he says in Matthew 12:43, when the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walks through dry places seeking rest, and finding none, he says, I'm going to return into my house. And when he's come, he finds it swept and garnished. In other words, what he's saying is, when that light leaves a body, it's going to come back. And this is the thing that bothers me so much when we take the serial killers of the world and we execute them without purging their minds. You're taking this light that is attached to a problem and you're allowing it to go out to seek another body, and then the body comes to be born and mommy is there, and what are you going to name? Oh, I'll call him Jeffrey. He's back. Well, what is this? So there's an intelligence here. The scripture uses the word spirit. That word is the angle of light that entered into you when you were a fetus. That is the Only you that can possibly survive. The only part of you, this is why it is so important for you to start considering, the only part of you that can possibly survive is the light, the energy, the photon. That's the only part of you that can survive. Nothing else can possibly survive. I mean, if you want to look at it, you want to think, go down to some of the old relatives that have been gone and dig them up, and you'll see it's still there. So we have to be mature about it. That part of you will not hang around and go into a grave any more than the light hangs around and goes into the garbage with the light bulb. What are you going to do? Let me ask you a question. When a light burns, when the bulb burns out, okay? The bulb burns out, you take the bulb, you put it in the garbage. Are you putting the light in the garbage with the bulb, or are you just putting the bulb? And if you just put the bulb in the garbage, where did the light go? Because what happened was, when the bulb no longer could sustain the light, the bulb died. The bulb was buried, but the light went on. So what are you? You're the bulb, but when the bulb can no longer sustain the light is going to go. And they are not going to put the light inside of the grave with the bulb, because the light won't go any more than the light. Where did it go? Any more than the light would go with the bulb. Whenever I've thrown a bulb, let me ask you a question. Have any of you ever thrown a bulb into the garbage with the light still on? Probably some of you have, because it's great. But I mean, generally, you don't, do you? Where did the light go? The light is gone. But what happens? I'll get another bulb. I've got a brand new bulb. And what happens when you connect it to the energy? There's light. It's back. The light is back on. I mean, I'm getting a little dramatic about this, but I mean, you know what I'm talking about. The light and the bulb are two different things. You are a bulb, that's for sure. But when your bulb breaks down, the light which is within you is going out and finding another bulb. Oh, what in utero?
Okay, now, there's duality all around us. We have the up and the yin and the yang. So you're saying that inside of us, we have that duality too.
Yes.
Okay. Then the second thing is when the light comes in, is that when life begins?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not necessarily, because you've got, I mean, what I'm talking about is there's a light that's given from your mother in the womb. There's a cord that's attached, and everything comes from your mother. But there is a point when the cord is separated. And now, can that energy sustain itself by itself? I mean, is there something inside of the baby now that the baby can go on without being attached, umbilically or uterally or whatever they call it? Is there any way it can go on without being attached? The answer is yes. There is light, there is energy which has entered into the baby. Now the baby can be animated. Now the baby can survive because of the light that has come into it. Into the pineal. Okay? Let me just, because you're getting late now, let me just say this. Okay? So you're going to see the world. Now listen to this. You're going to see the world. And remember, I'm not telling you to believe anything I've said here. Nobody believes me any of it, and that's fine. Please don't believe any of this. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just trying to put some wacky ideas in your head so you can go up and entertain your friends, But let me suggest this to you.
Tell you your light is out.
Yeah, I know. but all we're trying to do, we use the light, but we're just trying to say, let's get down to a point of logically explaining what we're about. Let's leave. One of the great things of the classic Greeks, of Plato's, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Democritus, Zeno, all of these guys. One of the main things they did is they put religion in the background. They didn't get involved with it. They had their gods and all of that stuff, but they said they didn't get involved in it. And it was amazing when you think of it, that these pagans provided the world with the foundation of life, for the betterment of all life, while the religious people, as far as life is contributed absolutely nothing but superstition. It was the Platos and those guys who were the pagans, remember that. These were the intelligent people who provided you with mathematics, who provided you with astronomy and anatomy, who provided you with medicine and all of these types of things. These were the brilliant minds, and they were pagans because they said, hey, come on, either we're going to find out logic here. But the religious people provided nothing but superstition, and called subatomic structures spirit. So you'll see the world through a fresh pair of eyes. You'll live again, but it will always seem like it's the first time, unless you've been teleported here for a purpose. If you've been teleported here for a purpose, you will know back in the recesses that you have another identity, and that when your mission here has been accomplished, you will rejoin that body that is being preserved for you in that street where you live. So, you come under the direction of a universal command center that has been labeled the Great White Lodge. We'll go into that. We are confident to consider that the body goes into the grave. It is not going to heaven. It is done. It is finished. And we who entered the fetus now scurry through the pineal, leave the body. And the deep question is, now that we have left the body as a particle of light and will travel in waveform, do we have consciousness? Do we take anything from this body with us in the form of consciousness? And in order to proceed, when we will proceed, we have to address one deep question, and that was one that I addressed with Mark when we were talking about this. The one, and I used to always ask this question when Carl Sagan would come on television and talk about all of these various interactions and different things that go on in the cosmos. And this is the question that we will address next. The question concerning the foundation of all thought concerning life is a one-word question. And the question is, why? And we'll answer that. Okay, thank you very much for sharing this time.